This is the CHGO Cubs podcast presented by PointsBet. Use code CHGO when you sign up to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. Hello, everyone. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on Wednesday, June 1st. And Brendan, I should say it's the CHGO Cubs podcast, but this is the Christopher Morel podcast.
It is. We got a win. We finished off the 4-game set on a positive note. Morel keeps getting on base like every other at bat, it seems like, and making stellar plays in center field. This is the Christopher Morel podcast, Corey.
Can we talk about Christopher Morel for an entire hour?
I could talk about him.
Tune in to find out.
3 episodes straight. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And look, it's one of those things where I love Cubs fans because right now, if you're joining us on YouTube, we are live. If you're over on Twitter, join us on YouTube so we can see your comments. The chat, everybody just wants to watch them win, man. The chat is full of people that are happy to see the Cubs win. They're happy to watch Christopher Morel play, and it's nice to see.
It is nice to see. We deserve more wins, Corey. We've been through a lot the past year and a half or so we deserve this. I deserve this.
Well, so the Cubs win 4-3 to finish this 4-game set off. They split 4 with the Brewers after dropping both ends of the doubleheader on Monday. So we have plenty to talk about, a lot of roster stuff going on. We will break it down. We should also be joined, Jared Wyllys filling in for our other guy, Ryan Herrera, live at Wrigley Field tonight. So we should be joined by Jared to tell us what David Ross and some of the boys have on their minds. And as Brendan and I always do, it's a post-game show, but we're also going to talk about this Brewers series as a whole. So let's just jump into some of the stuff that we saw. Before we look at these 4 games, though, Brendan, we might as well just start with Christopher Morel. Let's just ride the momentum. It's what the chat wants. If you're listening to us in the podcast feed on Thursday morning, sometimes we got to just vibe with the chat, right?
You have to.
And they want to hear about Morel. So Christopher Morel led off this game on Thursday night. He also finishes this game with a walk-off sacrifice fly. He drew a leadoff walk to start this game. It extended his franchise on-base streak record to begin a career to 15 games. And in the games that he's led off for this team, he's 4 for 7 with 2 walks. David Ross describing him as playing with your hair on fire, but calm in the box. I mean, it's early. He's going to have to make adjustments, right? But boy, this really feels like the Cubs found something.
Yeah, it does. It does. And one comment here Shane said, Morel reminds me of Javi and Willie during their rookie years. A young player with some excitement and energy. And absolutely right. I remember when I went to some Arizona Fall League games when Wilson was playing, and Wilson in between innings, during the actual inning, he is sprinting down the foul line, chasing foul balls like a kid. And that reminds me of the same type of persona and energy that Morel does bring. And you can see why those two guys interact very uniquely, I feel. Almost like Wilson's almost his mentor at this point. But Morel, unlike Javi and Wilson, is adapting at an unexpected rate. And Javi and Wilson have gone through so many adjustments. But what I mean by that is at the onset, it appears as if Morel is surprising so many people with that plate discipline. He starts off the game again with another 8-pitch walk, Corey. And then you saw just on that walk-off sacrifice fly, JD mentioned it, he spit on a changeup low and away. And you can tell he's seen it and just let it go. He's looking like not a rookie. He's looking like an actual veteran and doing this at multiple positions. It's really encouraging to see.
Yeah, and you also see some of it's always easy to tell when guys are sort of like channeling Javi Baez. Wilson does it a lot with the swim
Yeah.
move slide. He tried one tonight,
He
but it didn't
tries. Yeah,
work.
it didn't work.
But
Yeah.
you see this sort of influence of like clearly this guy played with Javi or he watched Javi, whatever it is. And I know some people tweeted this too. Like it felt like in that first inning, right? Morel starts the game with a walk. He goes to second on the Wilson Contreras single. Then they do a double steal and Morel scores on the throwing error by the catcher. Like that whole thing felt Javi Baez-esque, right? Like you get on, you get over, and you force something to happen with what you're doing on the bases, right?
Yeah.
It just has that energy.
I know. I mean, he has, 6 stolen bases on this season now. And like Joe said it in our comments here, like, where did that come from? He showed
we
no
talked
sign
about
of
that
having
the
a
other
good
day.
eye. Yeah, and it's like he's doing so many things well that I didn't expect. I didn't have this on my radar going into the year. We've heard about Morel for so many years, but now I'm thinking as the season's progressing, the probability he's a significant factor for next season is exceptionally high, if not as a starting guy in this lineup, whether it be in multiple positions. Maybe it's in center field even if he continues to get more looks here and Nico and Madrigal end up shoring up the middle infield. So Corey, like all I want to do is talk about Christopher Morel. All I want to do is watch Christopher Morel, and I'm just blown away with how good he's been looking.
Yeah, and you saw it too tonight. So with some of the roster stuff going on, which we'll get into, Jason Heyward's back. David Ross pointing out that Morel is going to be in center for most of this time. Now Nick Madrigal's back at second base. So again, some of that stuff we'll get into later once, maybe we cool off from the Morel hype of the beginning of this podcast, if it ever cools off. I know Cody's in here, Chris Morel forever.
I know. I saw
the chat really is blowing up with Christopher Morel love. It's great, right? It's nice to be excited about something.
It is.
But in center tonight, too, he makes a really nice catch ranging over his left shoulder.
Good job. You
let me position myself.
Right shoulder, but you said left.
Over his left shoulder, and he almost made that catch over his right shoulder going into the ivy. And I think that's one of those where, like, he's playing so many positions. He's not super familiar yet with Wrigley Field, just didn't have like a perfect feel for where that brick wall was, and probably for the best, right? We don't need him running literally into a brick wall. We would run through a brick wall for Christopher Morel.
Yes.
We do not need him running into a brick wall, though.
No, absolutely not.
Important clarification.
Thank you for clarifying,
But I just point that out because, like, just so much of what you see, he's going to have to make adjustments at the plate. But so much of what you're seeing everywhere else is really exciting, right? He's stealing bases. He's running the bases like an expert. He's hitting a sac fly in a moment where you need to be calm and get the job done, right? And come through in the clutch. He does it. And you see him making plays in the field where he didn't make that second catch, but he was really close. And I think if he's more familiar with Wrigley and how that wall plays and the ivy and all that, I think he makes that catch. He's such an athlete. He's such a baseball player. And as we've talked about, like, this is a guy that did not walk when he began his minor league career. And he's up there leading off, spitting on 8 pitches and taking walks. It's really kind of remarkable.
It is remarkable. So right now, maybe we'll just keep doing this every episode, but his chase rate is 22%. The major league average kind of deviates from like 28 to 30%. Christopher Morel is at 22%. That was the rate that you saw Dexter Fowler showcase in the leadoff spot during the Cubs' prime years. So the assumption is it's almost too good to be true, but at the same time, like, we don't know. This appears to be a player who might break some of the projections and some of your expectations, given the absurdity of everything he's doing at this point. And then, Corey, if you look at his overall, like, sprint speed, he's faster than 95% of players in the league. So we're talking about a guy who has exceptional raw power, who's gained a decent amount of weight, filled out his body supposedly over the last few years. And it does appear as if he's done that. And then he plays shortstop, second base, third base, center field. Then he's walking, and now he's stealing bases. I mean, like, what else do you want? And he's like an A-plus teammate and everyone gravitates towards his energy. This is why I could talk about Morel the entire episode without even having you talk, Corey, which maybe is what people want.
Probably. Yeah. Look, it's exciting. I mean, he's 22 years old.
22. I know. I didn't even say he's 22. He's 22 years old.
And that's the other thing when we talk about his ability to make these adjustments so far in his career in terms of his plate discipline, right? Like he's doing this all before he's 23 years old. Like, so it is easy to let your mind kind of wander, right? That like as he continues to get major league experience, grows physically, mentally, like he's just going to be even more exciting. Like, and again, like it's only been a few weeks. Like everything has ebbs and flows, and like that's okay. We've seen it with everybody that's come up. Even the most successful Cubs rookies had periods where they struggled or had to adjust or just didn't look themselves. That's okay. Mm-hmm. But you can see it on social media. You can see it here in the chat. Like it's exciting. He's an exciting player. And it's one of those things that it's only June 1st. We've got a lot of baseball left in this season. But if he continues to develop like this and becomes somewhat of an answer as far as who's going to be on this next great Cubs team, like that's a huge success.
It's a huge success. And the sample size is really not that small for the aspects of his game that we're talking about. It's not small for his sprint speed. It's not small currently for his plate discipline. So we talked about this in the past few episodes with the concept of like statistical stabilization. And I kind of hate using this because sometimes it can get misconstrued, as I've said in previous episodes. But the point at which chase rate stabilizes is around 50 plate appearances, which means you can rule out about like 50% of the randomness in a sample around 50 plate appearances. It's not like a certainty that everything that Morel's doing is due to his own underlying talent, but the likelihood is that his current chase rate is emblematic of his underlying talent, or the majority of it. So that's encouraging. Now, some people use stabilization as a marker to project the future, which is fair and I think logical, but it's under the context that the environment stays the same. And the environment in baseball does not stay the same, and pitchers will adjust to Christopher Morel, and he'll have to go through those different adjustment phases. But based on what we've seen so far, I think there's a good likelihood he can adjust fast because he's already done it. He's already showing the ability to do it at a young age as a 22-year-old. So he already has the precedence of adapting and adjusting. And for me, as a fan that likes stability on this roster, he's meeting every single criteria. Every box is being checked for me personally as a fan for what I'm looking for in a young player like Morel.
Yeah, and I think it goes without saying, like with some of these guys, we saw the Cubs send down Nelson Velasquez, so that was one of the roster moves. It's okay if there are times where, Velasquez was only up for a few days, if they feel like he's best served getting everyday playing time at AAA, right? And maybe they didn't feel like they were going to have that here and they want him to keep making adjustments. It's safe to say, though, like Morel has to stay. From us, that's not a question. But when you look at the front office and the moves, sometimes they're a little puzzling. But like the Velasquez one, it's like, okay, I can kind of make sense of this. I sort of see the logic. Morel, and I'm not saying they're thinking any differently, but like Morel needs to stay. He needs to continue making and playing at the major league level and just let it ride. Let's see what we got.
Based on the roster at this point, with the injuries to Seiya and the uncertainty, even with guys coming back from injuries, it seems likely he's going to stay. Now, there might come a time in the next few months. At this point, it seems very unlikely, but there might come a time where we have a discussion. Does Morel need to see more plate appearances in AAA, for example? I doubt that happens if he continues to do this well, but there is a possibility that does happen. But why even discuss that at this point when he's batting leadoff? This team has not had a consistent leadoff hitter for like the past 4 or 5 seasons now. And we have someone who's at the leadoff position with tons of speed, tons of power, and swinging at pitches at the same rate as Dexter Fowler, right? So at this point, he needs to be up. He needs to be playing. Corey, every day, not just on the roster. Every day, leadoff, on this team?
Yeah, so it's a good question that we just got pulled up in the YouTube chat from Joel, asking, David Bodie is back. He's rehabbing. I think he hit a home run either today or yesterday.
Yeah.
And the question is, has Morel played Bodie off the roster? And so this is kind of what I mean. Like, you can't move Morel down if he's continuing to play like this and showing that he can handle the moment at the major league level and all of that for David Bodie, right? Like, people were mad today, and it also came up. Isaac in the chat mentioned like Nelson Velasquez. Like, did he really need to go down, or was that kind of just an excuse with Heyward? Whatever. A lot talked about with that on Cubs Twitter today about Jason Heyward coming back. Like, why, and why not leave the 23-year-old Nelson Velasquez up? Again, if they don't feel like they can play Velasquez every day or as often as they want, then I do think it makes more sense to move him down. He does still have some refinement in his game that's necessary. He's still very young, right? So I don't know that it was an excuse. Trust me, like, at least present company, me and Brendan, nobody wants to see Jason Heyward out there. I'd rather they pick anybody from the minors and
He
see
almost
what
won
they
the
have
game
in them.
tonight, Corey. What are you talking about? He almost won the game tonight. What are you talking about? He almost had a nice
Hitting a
throw in the
line
game.
drive into a glove is not almost winning the game, Brendan.
Yeah.
I know you don't mean that.
But those swing changes, they look so promising.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay,
Anyway,
continue.
can I block someone from the? Can I block my own
I'll see you
co-host
guys.
from the?
I quit the podcast.
But to the Bodie, yeah, there we go. Just
Joey,
me.
what is that?
Thank you, Joey. To Joel's question about David Bodie, like, they clearly, are letting Bodie work back. I think it's good if they can have, someone with like who's been around, like Bodie's, can move around. He's versatile, even though he hasn't had a lot of offensive success in the last couple of years. But that's like the main thing for me is you cannot let anything going on with David Bodie is not more important or even remotely as important as whatever's going on with Christopher Morel. So you can bring Bodie back, but you better be jettisoning somebody else than Christopher Morel, and he should never take playing time from him. Now, again, to reiterate, Ross said that Morel's going to be in center. Like, that's where he's going to play the bulk of this time with this sort of set of injuries, right, as certain players are out. So maybe that changes. But for me, I do not care about David Bodie if it's related to Christopher Morel. The priority has to be putting Morel in the best situation for him and finding out as much as you can about him.
I agree with you. If this season, just to play devil's advocate, if this season is about finding evidence to keep certain guys on the roster for 2023 and beyond, Bodie's not a free agent until 2026 because of that contract pre-arbitration deal. That is a factor. I know he's been frustrating during times, especially when the Cubs were showcasing some competitiveness. The one factor to consider with Bodie, and we just talked about this with Morel, the offensive environment has changed where the average weighted on base average in the league is down. I think I have to update it after today, but I think it's down by about 7 or 8 points. It's a huge drop because the ball has changed. So if you look at David Bodie last season and seasons before, we know he hits the ball really hard, and it's possible, like what we're seeing with Nico's value, that those underlying factors combined with the positional diversity in the infield does have value for this team as a utility guy. Does that mean he needs to get plate appearances and take those away from Christopher Morel? No. That, for me, would be in the form of DFAing Ortega, DFAing Jason Heyward at that point, DFAing VR if we really need to. So those are three guys right there. If you really want to give Morel at bats, I prefer those guys because they don't have a likely future with the team to go away.
Yeah, I think that absolutely makes sense. Yeah, as people said, and it's brought up in the chat too, like with Madrigal as well. Like, you got to see what you have there. So there's a lot of guys. What it comes down to is they're going to have to be very deliberate about this roster. You have to be giving the opportunities to the right guys. Maybe you want Ortega in there because perhaps he's a trade piece to somebody. He's hit better in the month of May, trying to show something there. But you have to, at some point, if we're talking about Heyward or Bodie or VR or some of these guys, like, that should not be impacting exciting young players that are electrifying the fan base and the team. You have to prioritize that, whatever you need to do. So we're going to bring in Jared in a second here, but we do want to hit our first ad break, Brendan, and then we'll talk to Jared Wyllys live from Wrigley Field.
As you guys know, the best way to support CHGO is to download the PointsBet app and use code CHGO when you sign up. If you make a $50 or more first-time deposit, you'll receive a free CHGO membership, which unlocks all of our web content, and you'll even get a free shirt of your choice from the CHGO locker. If you have any questions, just email pointsbet@allchgo.com. We'll help you out. Remember that PointsBet is your home for live in-game betting. They even have a new exclusive feature, live NBA same-game parlay, for the first time ever. Build the perfect live same-game parlay only with PointsBet. Combine your favorite bets anytime during the game. And you can even boost your live same-game parlays. And now, online sign-up is available in Illinois. You can actually download the PointsBet app right now and register your account from start to finish, all from your phone. Signing up with the fastest sportsbook just got easier than ever, so you can start living your bet life in seconds. Again, use code CHGO to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. So what are you waiting for? Once the game starts, don't just bet. Live your bet life with PointsBet. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. Second break here from our other sponsor, Strava Coffee. Want to start your day with a competitive edge? Strava CBD coffee is a game changer and has helped thousands of people to improve their overall wellness and quality of life. Strava delivers delicious, fresh roasted specialty coffee infused with organic, broad spectrum CBD. CBD from hemp doesn't make you high or hungry, but it does offer real benefits that can help you feel alert and focused without the jitters. Live your day more balanced with less anxiety and fewer aches and pains. Plus, including CBD in your daily routine can even help you enjoy more restful sleep so you can wake up feeling your best. The best part, Strava is all about quality. Everything is small batch, fresh, and shipped straight to your door. Strava also offers concentrated full spectrum CBD tinctures for those looking for a more traditional CBD format with a powerful entourage effect of benefits. CHGO listeners can save 25% off their entire purchase when you use code CHGO25. That's 25% off your entire order at StravaCraftCoffee.com when you use code CHGO25 at checkout. Discount coupon valid on non-subscription purchases only, and that's 1 use per customer. And if you're already in love with Strava, subscribe and save with Strava Coffee Club. With Strava, you're in control. Save on your favorite coffees and have them automatically delivered to your home or office on your preferred schedule.
All right, so with that, we're going to bring in Jared Wyllys live from beautiful, historic Wrigley Field, I believe. Hi, Jared. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you guys. You hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you well.
This is sort of full circle for Brendan and I. Jared was one of the first guests I think we ever had like 6 years ago when we did this podcast.
Yeah.
And he was actually the first person that we had on as a guest multiple times. And now here we are on a fancy new YouTube show together.
Look at that.
So Jared, what's going on at Wrigley Field? What did David Ross have to say to everybody tonight?
Just lots of positive things about Morel, of course, because of the way that the game ended, the way he's fit in that leadoff spot and brought a lot of energy to the lineup, top to bottom. But of course, coming up with gets the ball in play so that Heyward can score from third. A lot of positive energy because of getting the walk off and their first walk off win since it was last September.
So, Jared, David Ross talked about Christopher Morel playing center field mostly, with Seiya Suzuki going on the injured list. It's probably too early to tell, but in your opinion, once Seiya Suzuki does come back, we've had a lot of comments here in the YouTube section wondering at some point, does Morel kind of get crunched down, even in the form of like a demotion? But also, we were just talking about maybe that's likely not the case given his performance. But the question I have is, once the outfield does come back healthy, do you personally see him in that center field role predominantly, or do you also see him shifting around, let's say, to spell Patrick Wisdom at third base, or depending on how Nick Madrigal does at second base as well?
Yeah, I think this is where his defensive versatility is really going to work to his advantage because, as a young player in a position like this where he's got roster options, sometimes that means you're the guy that gets demoted even if you're hitting well. But because Morel can play in the outfield, multiple spots in the infield, I think that's going to create a better opportunity for him to stick around because there is a potential roster crunch coming up here when Suzuki does return, and now that Heyward's back, that's why Nelson Velasquez was sent down today. This is just the way it works out when you're a young guy who has the roster options. But yeah, I think that's the thing to watch out for with Morel is, yes, he's hitting, he's doing well, he's getting on base, every game he's played so far. But I think the thing that's really going to save him here is they can keep him as sort of a utility guy because they can use him in 3, maybe even 4 different defensive spots.
Yeah. Has Ross talked about that at all? I mean, I know that he doesn't control the roster. Maybe he has a say in it, whatever. But it does seem like he's going to be in an interesting spot. We had some folks we were just talking about, what if David Bodie comes back? They're talking about Clint Frazier, then when Seiya's back, now Heyward is back. Like, has he talked at all about that balance between you've got some of these guys that have been here, but also this is supposed to be a productive year to kind of figure out what some guys have. Like Rivas has been in there a lot at first base. He's struggled recently, but still kind of getting that run, at least for now. Like, has he talked about that balance and sort of, and again, it's not that he has a say in all of it, but it just seems like it's going to be really interesting for him pretty soon.
Yeah, he's talked about that a little bit. Actually, today I asked him about, speaking of Rivas, how he's been using Schwindel at the DH a little bit more often over the last few weeks. And he said that has a lot, not so much to do with Schwindel as much as it does to do with getting Rivas at bats, getting him a chance to see more trips to the plate. Because even if he's not getting the results right now, Ross talked about the way he likes the at bats that he's having. He's getting good contact, those kinds of things. So it's definitely on his mind where he knows that, some of this is on the horizon where he's going to have to really think about where he can slot guys in. Because as you look at, Bodie's probably about a week away or so. I think June 6th, if I remember right, was the date that they've kind of talked about as the day that he may return. So it's going to take some creativity on Ross's part as far as, figuring out where he can get guys in the lineup, but then also he does not necessarily have full control over who's going to get optioned, who's going to get sent down. This might be the time, does somebody get designated for assignment? Do we see a move like that? It's possible. I think it could be something more along the lines of, we saw today the Manny Rodriguez getting the 60-day IL designation because that frees up a 40-man roster spot and can sometimes help you with some of those things a little bit depending on what you want to do there. So, but yeah, I think the next week roster-wise is going to get really interesting.
Yeah, my personal preference would be to even see more of Clint Frazier, and we had a few comments about Clint Frazier as well. And as you start in your mind doing these lineup iterations, it's getting really tricky. I know VR had that injury with the workout band coming back at his face, which, if that happened to me, I'd probably be out for the entire season because I hate that type of stuff. So with him and with Ortega, for example, do you just your opinion, you've been around the team, do you personally see those guys getting DFA'd relatively soon? I think my idea is we're going to get more of these IL stints, whether you want to call them phantom IL stints, if you will, as long as possible. But from your perspective, and I know Ortega's gotten some leadoff chances and his discipline does look good, how do you see this shaping up? Because it is, as you said, with even Bodie coming back here in the next week or so, it's going to get really tight.
It really is. And I do think that this is where some of those, like you said, some of those phantom IL designations, you see turf toe pops up a lot and some of those kinds of things where, it buys you some time for some guys because, they don't necessarily want to make a decision on Rafael Ortega just yet, or even Jonathan VR just yet. But I think if somebody, this is just my speculation, if somebody's potentially in line to be DFA'd in the next week or so, Jonathan VR might be the guy, because he's, there's a lot of reasons for it. He's an older player. He's, you watch him, he's clearly lost a step on defense. His bat speed is not what it used to be. And so for a team that's in a position where you really need to see what you have in younger players, it becomes really important to give them looks. They got to get the innings on the field. They have to get the at-bats. Clint Frazier is definitely somebody I would like to see get more starts, more opportunities, because the potential is there. The potential with him is so great, and so you don't want to see that spoiled because you're too busy giving starts to other players. And so I think, between a mixture of some maybe vague IL designations, or just, somebody like VR or even Ortega getting DFA'd in the next week or 2-3 weeks or so, that's probably, if I had to guess, that's probably what we're looking at in the future.
Yeah, someone in the chat brought up Simmons as well. Like, I know that, for some of these guys, they've been hurt or they haven't gotten, a full look or whatever. But at some point, it just does not make sense. Like in my head as I'm reading this, like, okay, Heyward's back, Bodie comes back, this guy's back. It's like, this is too many guys that, like, it just doesn't matter. Right. Like, I know that early in the year, you want to see what you have. You don't really know how things are going to play out. But it's to even, and I know we're not really thinking this, but like to even have a conversation where it's like, oh, well, they would, keep this guy instead of Christopher Morel. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, that's not what this season is supposed to be, with where they are and how everything has shaken out so far. Like, they're going to have to make tough decisions. And I hope that they're prepared to do that, because based on what we're reading, they would have, a bit of a mutiny on their hands. But I wanted to ask you tonight about Kyle Hendricks. So Hendricks, 79 pitches and only goes 5. Did David Ross just feel like he was getting hit hard, or was there any particular reason beyond that he didn't come back out for the 6th?
Yeah, it really had more to do with who the Brewers had coming up in their lineup in the next inning, and him wanting to go to his bullpen there so that he could, I think it was a pocket of left-handed hitters coming up. And so it just felt like it was the time to go to somebody else. He wasn't necessarily, for Hendricks, he said there were a couple of hard hit balls tonight, but it wasn't, not a great start, but also not, we've seen a lot worse from Kyle Hendricks over the last couple of seasons. And so, the early hook tonight, I think, had more to do with where the Brewers were in their lineup coming into the 6th inning.
Jared, you pointed out in your tweet today just his pitch breakdown, which looked pretty fascinating, given heavy four-seam up in the zone, sinkers inside, as we've seen throughout the years, and then change-ups down in a way, as we've always seen. You also pointed out that David Ross was talking about Hendricks' change-up and his desire for Kyle to throw more change-ups. I'm curious what prompted that, because in recent starts, maybe not the last couple starts, but as of the last 3-4 weeks, he has led a few starts throwing more changeups than any other pitch type. So it was a little surprising that Ross brought that up today, and even more so, at least for me, because Kyle's thrown more four seams this year than sinkers for the first time in his career, and he's dropped his sinker usage by about 15 percentage points from last season, and his sinker's getting beat up like none other season prior to this one. So it just seemed peculiar in my mind why Ross brought up the changeup and not the other fastball subtypes.
Yeah, some of that. So that has to do with, before we talked to David Ross today, I spent some time with Wilson Contreras and I was asking Wilson about his perspective on Hendricks and why we've seen some of the inconsistencies that we have over the last, almost season and a half now. And one of the things that Wilson mentioned was he said specifically he thinks it's more of a game planning issue than an execution issue. And those are Wilson's words. So I asked him a little bit of, more about, what he meant by that. And he talked a little bit about, pitch selection, in-game adjustments. And so then with that in mind, when we spoke to David Ross, I asked Ross, hey, what's your take on what we're seeing from Kyle Hendricks over the last, this season, but also last season as well. And so he brought that up in his response, was that he felt like a part of what's going on with Hendricks is pitch selection. And he mentioned specifically, I'd like to see him use the changeup more. It's one of the best pitches in baseball. So that might have something to do with, Brendan, like you pointed out, this increase in his changeup use over the last few starts could be a product of Ross and some others having conversations with Kyle about, hey, this is an adjustment that we think you need to make. So we'll have to see kind of how that plays out over the next few starts, but there could be something going on there.
I just want to follow up on that, and Corey, you can take it away. Kyle was very strong in his praise to Yan Gomes when Yan was catching Kyle. And I don't want to contrast Wilson versus Yan Gomes, but it just stood out to me that Kyle seemed really comfortable with Yan, and he used, just to paraphrase, that Yan was adjusting well in game based on his perception of the opposing batter's swings. So because he said that, I was curious, all right, are we going to see Yan Gomes more when Kyle's pitching as a result of that comfort level? And so I'm just curious on your thoughts with that, especially because Wilson's talking about it's more of a game planning issue than an execution issue. And that's what triggered that thought in my mind with Yan Gomes.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think if Gomes was healthy right now, there's probably a good chance that he would have been tonight's catcher. But, one of the things that I asked Wilson was, how do you, when you're working on in-game adjustments, as you're recognizing the opposing hitter swings and things like that, how's it different when you're dealing with somebody like Kyle, who is a veteran pitcher and somebody that you've caught most of his career, versus say like, a Justin Steele, who's a younger pitcher. And one of the things that Wilson said was that he, with veteran pitchers, he's more inclined to let them do what they think is the right thing to do, or he doesn't guide them quite as much. And so some of what Hendricks does could just be a product of Contreras is allowing Kyle to drive things rather than, Wilson calling some of the pitches, or even going out there and suggesting some things, or, having a little bit more of a direct say in what the pitch selection is. Now he did say that if, in an inning or something where Hendricks is really struggling, he's going to go out and give him some pointers. But he does say he backs off a little bit when it's somebody like Kyle on the mound.
Got it.
So last thing, Jared, before we hit our second break here, and then we'll let you go. I'm just curious. I don't know if you talked to him or Rossi talked about it tonight, but as I was at the game tonight, it's certainly been true all season. But it just stood out once again, especially seeing the swings, 2 strikeouts tonight. What they ran into with David Robertson has really just been kind of amazing. Not that he didn't have that pedigree, but coming off of, some injury shortened seasons, not really sure where he was going to be. I joked, I was there with friend of the podcast, Jeff Everson, and I joked to him that it's June 1st, but I feel almost like I did last year with Kimbrel, where I'm like, David, don't bring him in anymore. This has gone so incredibly well. His numbers are so great. We just got to get to the end of July here, because this is just talk about striking gold with what they have there.
Yeah. Maybe they should just trade him tonight.
Right now.
Do it now. Because you're right. This is like the ultimate find. He has some history. There's the pedigree is there, like you said. But man, talk about plucking him out of obscurity almost. Right. And now you've just generated this perfect trade piece for the deadline, assuming fingers crossed that everything continues to go well. But this we could look back on this, and this could be in hindsight, a really brilliant move for them in the process of this rebuild, as they're looking to restock their farm system. quietly we may be able to say that David Robertson move, that was a big one for us. Because you're right. And again, if you get a phone call tonight, Jed, maybe let's make it happen.
Yeah.
It's a long way to go, but I just did find myself thinking
Right.
that. Like I'm
Yeah.
I'm looking at his ERA, and I'm like, boy, this has gone so well. Like if we could just wrap this up, might be the thing to do. But all right, Jared, we'll let you go. You can see, if you're on YouTube, you can see his Twitter handle there at Jared Wyllys. You can find his work, of course, over at allchgo.com. Jared, thank you. We will talk to you soon. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Brendan.
Thank you, Jared. See you soon. All right. So another break here from our sponsor, PointsBet. And then speaking of trade talk, it just reminded me of all the good things that we're seeing from the farm system, from trades last season. So it might be a good segue to introduce some of those updates on those players. So if you enjoy CHGO, and one way to help us continue to grow is to download the PointsBet app and use code CHGO when you sign up. Not only are you going to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000, but if you make a $50 or more first-time deposit, you'll receive a free CHGO membership, which unlocks all of our web content, and you'll even get a free shirt of your choice from the CHGO locker. If you want to see more of Jared Wyllys' work and his conversations with Wilson Contreras and all of that writing, it's on that website. Just got to sign up. And if you have any questions, email pointsbet@allchgo.com and we'll help you out. And in case you missed it, online sign up is available in Illinois. You can actually download the PointsBet app right now and register your account from start to finish, all from your phone. You'll be signing up with the fastest sportsbook that's easier than ever, so you can start living your bet life in seconds. So what are you waiting for? Once the game starts, don't just bet. Live your bet live with PointsBet. Gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.
Well, so you said it was a good segue to talk about, some of the prospects and stuff, but I also really want to talk about on Monday, we saw a couple new faces.
We have Swarmer, we have Espinoza,
and Espinoza.
Yeah.
And the thing that really stands out about Anderson Espinoza, firstly, we'll talk about his outing and what he was able to bring, but the fact that the Cubs were able to last year get someone who did that for them on Monday at the major league level for Jake Marisnick,
I know.
Right? Is pretty remarkable. And it is one of those instances where it kind of makes you stop, and you don't have to support, the larger process that led them to the trade deadline last year. As I always say, we're not going to relitigate that whole thing every time we bring it up, but you can, I think, hope, because they did it, they engaged in the process. You can appreciate, it is important to have these guys. And even if you feel like they may not, that's why I bring up, maybe they want to keep Ortega in there because he hit better in the month of May. He's shown you some stuff. Maybe he gets you something like this. Jake Marisnick was not good for the Cubs last year. And they ended up getting a guy who comes in on Monday and throws 4 innings, gives up 2 runs, 3 walks, but 6 strikeouts in a spot that assuredly Anderson Espinoza did not know he was going to be in, on Sunday or early Monday morning, right? I'm sure that was sort of sprung on him as he was going to come in and maybe come out of the bullpen and see what happens. So you have to not only, give props to Espinoza for the effort and coming up into a spot like that, jumping into a division game and giving you 4 nice innings to save the bullpen in the middle of a long doubleheader day. But also, just take a second to think, some of these players, they might not be exciting, but if this is the position you're in as a team that's looking to make trades at the deadline, each individual guy can end up being important. You look at the Jock Peterson trade too, Bryce Ball has shown you some stuff. And that felt like a total throwaway trade at the time that it happened, right?
It did.
And maybe these guys aren't going to go on to be Hall of Famers or anything, but each little productive thing you can get, it has value. It adds up.
That's a great point too. I didn't think about it like that, and it reminded me how disappointing VR has been, because he would have fit that mold in terms of, if he's valuable, then you can get a player, a prospect back that has some potential that might have value as soon as next year. So the fact that the Cubs are losing games, that sucks. And the fact that they're doing so because pieces you signed or you expected to do well are just not performing that well. And that has bad implications for this season, but also for the future as well. And to your point, Corey, the reason that might be more valuable now than, let's say, 5 years ago is because certain teams are likely targeting certain types of players. You have more data, you have more interpretations of that data now, and you look at someone like Anderson Espinoza, he's interesting in that his stuff doesn't necessarily jump out at you. And he had 2 Tommy John surgeries, former top prospect. So it's unfortunate he had to go through those periods in his career trajectory that were just complete blockades. But when he made his start with the Cubs, he was unique. And I understand why the Cubs ended up going out there and getting him. And so what he did in his not brief outing, he threw, over 80 pitches in his start, was he led with a four-seamer, and then he used basically a slider outside of his four-seamer. And he threw 23 sliders in that start. His slider is very unique. That slider does not have much horizontal movement, and it has a little bit more vertical movement than league average. And he throws that slider at 79 miles per hour. So it's more of like, more vertical breaking type pitch, but it's not going to sweep across the zone as you might expect, as you might even expect to see what Daniel Norris now does with his slider. So I'm wondering, and we're not seeing it now, but I'm wondering based on his profile, if he's the ideal candidate once he gets settled into like getting innings, to changing that slider, to maybe using that slider as more of a sweeping slider, as we've seen Daniel Moskos do with Daniel Norris. So just keep tabs on that. So although certain players being acquired, they may not look good on paper. You go to their Fangraphs page, you're like, what is this? Why should I be excited? You even go to their Baseball Savant page, and you're like, well, nothing jumps out. We got to get kind of beyond those days, because there are underlying reasons that these coaches are now part of the discussion to target certain players. There's a reason why Craig Breslow is part of that front office targeting certain players. Like Tom Tango, I don't know if you guys know who Tom Tango is, but he created he's like one of the godfathers of sabermetrics. He said in like 2008, there will come a time where scouts and statisticians are speaking the same language, and that time is now. Like that's actually what's going on with all this new StatCast data, and we're seeing the results of that in the form of many Cubs guys that we've seen, in the form of Rowan Wick, in the form of Caleb Killian. Caleb Killian changed his curveball grip. He was a guy, perfect example. You go to his Baseball, Savant page, let's say like minor league data, for example. Nothing would jump out. He had a nice cutter, four-seamer, wasn't walking guys, but his underlying pitch peripherals didn't look that promising. They changed him. They had an idea, and it's been working, and now he's the best pitching prospect, the best closest pitching prospect to the major leagues. So it is a good point to remember, it sucks that VR is not doing well, but when you see Espinoza come up and show value because you got Jake Marisnick last offseason, well, the same can be applied for this season too.
Yeah, it's also why it's a bummer that Drew Smyly hits the IL 15 days. Hopefully that's not long-term. We've seen that oblique stuff be problematic. So hopefully they can iron that out. We'll see about that. Also wanted to, talk Matt Swarmer. 6 innings on Monday, 5 hits, 4 runs, but only one of them earned. The Cubs defense was not great that night. 1 walk and 6 strikeouts. This was a quality start. He should remain in the rotation. I don't know if he's been named for one of these games against the Cardinals this weekend, but they have that doubleheader on Saturday. I would assume that he gets one of those games. Not sure what their plan is exactly for both of those games, or however they want to do it. But this is another one. Like the more, I think we talked about this on the last episode, like the whole point of replenishing the farm system and changing all the infrastructure. You and I have talked a lot, but a lot has been made about like the Cubs overhauled a ton of their infrastructure on both sides of the ball, new coaches, new technologies, new philosophies, new ways of thinking. Right. And like the whole point of doing all of that and investing in all of that is so that you can bring these guys up. And, again, maybe they're not all Cy Young candidates or future Hall of Famers or whatever, but you brought somebody up who was in your system and he gave you a quality start against a division rival on a day where you really needed it in a doubleheader, and he should have gotten the win. Right? Like that's something that we were not really accustomed to the Cubs being able to do with such ease. And it feels like whether it's, a starter or someone in relief, or even as we're seeing, someone like Christopher Morel on offense, we're just seeing more of an influx of like, hey, we can just call this guy up and he might be able to contribute for a day or a week or a month or hopefully years, right?
Yeah, and Swarmer, he was an interesting watch. He threw mostly mostly sliders. Getting him Espinosa confused. So in his 89 pitches, he threw 49 sliders, Corey. You brought up Drew Smyly. Drew Smyly throws mostly curveballs. Now, this is a good example. If you go to his Baseball Savant page, Drew Smyly's curveball rates so badly, like in terms of spin rate, active spin rate. And so the thinking is, why would you be throwing this bad curveball as your dominant pitch type? Well, any secondary pitch in theory is likely going to be better than a fastball, just from a pitch value perspective. So I'm thinking the same thing with Matt Swarmer, because his slider does not rate that well. His active spin rate is only 30%. That's the amount of spin that contributes to movement. As a comparison, Marcus Stroman, his active spin rate is 60% on that slider. However, interestingly, Stroman's spin axis is exactly the same as Matt Swarmer's, but they both have very different movement profiles. So it's possible that although the active spin rate is really bad, that pitch is more so behaving kind of like not a gyro per se, but it might be behaving in an unpredictable fashion for these hitters that actually might make that pitch having some value. So if he continues to start, which it appears as if he's going to, look for that slider, because we've seen precedents for pitchers who don't have good stuff, but if they throw their secondary pitches mostly, then they're valuable. And that is in the form of Drew Smyly, who has decent command. And Matt Swarmer might be that same guy as well if he continues to have that command, but he's not going to be that ace. Like, he's not going to be the same type of pitcher we're talking about when we discuss, like, Keegan Thompson and his trajectory and Albert Alzolay and all these guys. He's not in that conversation, at least for now, unless he drastically changes anything. But he's still interesting nonetheless, because you have a mold in Drew Smyly that can be applied to Matt Swarmer.
Yeah, and there's a good comment in our YouTube chat now from Joe talking about building a solid base of a roster is very underrated. Not everyone will turn into stars, but getting them to be major league contributors will add up. And that's something that we've talked about in the recent weeks. And it ranges from all these guys, like even Patrick Wisdom, sort of falls into that category. Exactly what his role looks like going forward, who knows? But right now, he's a guy with 11 home runs and around an 800 OPS and stellar defense. He made that play again. He hit like the quintessential Patrick Wisdom play is that slow roller down the third base line that he charges in, makes that running throw, and he nails it every time. Throw is on the line every time. But I read that point from Joe, because that's kind of the key. And you see this with this group, like they've been mostly competitive, right? And like, I'm not trying to pat the Cubs on the back for fielding a team that doesn't get killed every night, right? Like, but there is something to these guys being able to contribute at the major league level and compete, right? They're not ready to win right now. That's very clear, right?
What?
Or win at the level win at the level that we want them to win at.
They're only
right?
like 10 games back, Corey. They're still
okay,
fine.
Brendan. Remember, people don't always know if you're being serious.
I know.
But being competitive every night, calling guys up and having them be able to throw a quality start or give you 4 solid innings in a doubleheader or hit a walk-off sac fly, whatever it is, like that stuff matters. And as Joe said, it builds up. You may not have stars, right? Maybe Christopher Morel is a star, but everybody doesn't have to be a star. They don't have to be that elite talent, right? But you need contributors, right? A roster is 25 plus guys, right? With injuries, it's even more than that through a championship season, right? You need to find them somewhere. And the more you can find, right, the less that Jed has to do. They're going to have to go out and add elite talent when they're ready to win the World Series again, right? There's no question about that. But the more talent you can fill in, whether it's the last guy on the roster or a middle guy on the roster, whatever, the better. It's all important, and that's what this year should be about. And it kind of goes back to our conversation with Jared about the roster crunch, right?
Yeah.
Like, you got to figure these things out, and you have to maximize how much information you're getting. I do want to do a little bit of a minor league spotlight, though, because I know Cody, I believe, is a big DJ Hers guy, so I'm sure they're going to talk about this on Thursday, but it happened tonight on Wednesday, and we would be remiss if we did not bring this up, because it is one of the most, I think, exciting outings from a Cubs pitching prospect in a very long time.
Since Killian 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So DJ Hers went 5 innings tonight. He struck out 12 batters for the South Bend Cubs tonight. If you're looking at MLB Pipeline, DJ is the Cubs' number 9 prospect. But when you face 17 guys over 5 innings, Brendan, and you strike out 12 of them,
pretty good.
Seems pretty good. I think that'll play, right?
I think that will play. Yeah. So DJ Hers, we're probably going to talk about this guy so much over the next year as he continues to get promoted. So we're not going to go into too much detail right now. But if you're hearing about DJ Hurst for the first time, congratulations, because you're getting a dopamine hit, because this guy is unbelievable. You go watch him pitch. Greg Huss of the Growing Cubs podcast compared him to Dontrelle Willis in terms of his unorthodox delivery. Kind of has that rock back action. I'm not going to stand up and do it myself here, but he looks very interesting from a delivery perspective.
We can't get a demo?
I know. Maybe next episode. I'll put my baseball pants on and we can do it. I'll wear my socks. Then we have DJ Hurt's pitch types. He has plus pitches, guys, like from an actual Statcast perspective. We talked about maybe Drew Smiley and Matt Swarmer not having those advantages. DJ Hurst owns those metrics. He has a relatively new, or apparently relatively new, spike curveball. He has a changeup that grip was being developed during the COVID shortened season, and that's when he kind of came on the scene. And then he throws, today he was like 92, 93, 94. He can maybe sit consistently in the mid 90s. All those pitches rate above the average, especially when you compare the changeup and the curveball off his fastball. Keegan Thompson, Justin Steele, we talked about, I wish they threw more changeups because their breaking pitches are so good. DJ Hurst, he has that. He has a changeup. He has a breaking pitch. He has a good fastball. He has a unique delivery. He's young. He's exciting. He might be the most interesting Cubs prospect because of those features, absent of Caleb Killian currently, that I've seen in quite some time. I mean, Braylon Marquez has been fun to follow, but the injuries, unfortunately, have sidelined him. But from my perspective, I don't recall being so excited about one pitcher, a lefty, DJ Hurts, in a long time, Corey. He checks off every box for me when looking at a young, exciting pitching prospect.
Yeah, so 10 starts on the year for DJ Hurst so far in 2022. He is at high A right now, 21 years old, 1.45 ERA, 0.86 whip.
That sounds pretty good to me.
Pretty good.
Sounds pretty good.
And, look, I know, a lot of these guys are young. Killian is knocking on the door of the major leagues, but a lot of these guys are really young. But you look around, like Kevin Alcantara continues to just mash the ball. And PCA and like Brendan Davis working through that back injury. Hopefully, he can get back soon and get back on track.
It's exciting.
Boy, you watch, I was watching, I think it was from Greg Huss, the aforementioned Greg Huss. I had tweeted one from Alcantara that was a fastball in on his hands. I mean, you watch that, just the bat speed, the ability to get the hands in and just rip the ball to left field. There's some exciting stuff going on, right? You may not want to be patient. I don't know how long some of this is going to take. I want the team to be good. I was there at Wrigley Field tonight. I want that team to be good. That's what I care about more than anything.
Do you have a hot dog? No,
I had a cheeseburger tonight.
Okay, you switched it up on me. You had a hot dog yesterday. Okay.
Hot dog on Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't eat only hot dogs. My doctor says it's not good for me, so I had a cheeseburger. But There's exciting stuff at these levels. And as you see, it's not only just the young guys, right? Like they are bringing up some of these other guys. They're graduating guys. They're giving them a chance. So it's exciting stuff. But I wanted to talk about DJ tonight because it happened tonight. And it's not often we get a Cubs pitching prospect that just goes out there and strikes out 12 guys in 5 innings. So
no doubt.
Want to make sure that's on your radar as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So the CHGO Sports
Look at that.
asking us
What
onions
an
on the
honor.
cheeseburger. No onions on the cheeseburger. They didn't have them in a rush. I only care about the onions on the hot dogs. But if they had a bin of grilled onions, I would put it on everything. But
Not raw onions though, right? It has to be grilled.
No raw onions.
Yeah, you got to get that sweetness extracted when you grill those onions. So
when you come over to Wrigley Field, you can tell me how to eat things. But
I
went. I had a cheeseburger. I got a W tonight. All right, leave me alone.
Yeah, well, I got the W flag in the back.
So it is a series split for the Cubs. Patrick Wisdom wins it with his 11th home run of the year on Tuesday. Christopher Morel, a sac fly on Wednesday, wins it. So all in all, it is a split. And now, Brendan, we have a weekend full of the St. Louis Cardinals to look forward to.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. Peter Crow Armstrong got promoted, by the way, from Myrtle Beach. So just another thing to be more excited about. So keep following those minor league guys.
When are we we have to get the whole CHGO Cubs crew to South Bend. We got to go to South Bend.
Do it. I'm down.
Right.
We'll have to talk to some very influential people to make that happen.
That just seems to be the thing to do.
Point.
Live broadcast. Maybe we go for a DJ Hurst start.
Maybe
right. I think Jordan Wicks is there too.
Maybe you take a picture of your hot dog in South Bend. So we can do multiple.
I can't vouch for the hot dogs there.
Okay.
So
I'll
have to test.
Jeez. Yeah. Okay. All right. Joey's probably like, finish up, guys, finish up. All right. So let me preview this upcoming series against the aforementioned St. Louis Cardinals. So first game is Thursday night, 7:05 p.m. start time. We have Keegan out there pitching for the Cubs. He's 5-0 with a 1.58 ERA. He'll be facing former top prospect Liberatore for the Cardinals, who's 1-0 with a 3.72 ERA on the season. And then we have Marcus Stroman pitching for the Cubs on Friday, your traditional 1:20 p.m. start time. He'll be facing Michaelis for the Cardinals. I always forget if you say Michaelis or Michaelis, but I hate that guy so much that I kind of just want to mess it up on purpose anyway. On the year, he's 3-3 with this 2.67 ERA. He ate a lizard one time, by the way. There's a video of it. The guy's a bizarre person. And then
How do you know that?
I saw a YouTube video. He ate a lizard, dude. I don't know. On Saturday, we have a double header. So keep tabs on who's pitching those games. Nothing's been announced yet. I believe Swarmer is likely to pitch that game. I'm not sure if they actually finalized that, but just keep tabs on that. And then on Sunday to finish off this long weekend set against the Cardinals, we have Adam Wainwright pitching for them on a 6:08 p.m. start time. Wainwright's having a good year. He's 5-4 with a 2.75 ERA. He'll be facing Justin Steele for the Cubs, who's 1-5 with a 5.4 ERA. There is a ton to watch for this series. Basically, every Cubs pitcher, keep tabs on. Justin Steele, for me, is probably the most, urgent's not the right word, but the one I'm focusing on the most, just because I want to see him use maybe those changeups more and those sinkers more. But also, I still want to see what those lineups look like with Heyward back in the fold, Clint Frazier back in the fold, how Ross uses those plate appearances, if Morel is going to keep batting leadoff. And yeah, there's a lot to follow this upcoming week.
Yeah, and as we talked about, unfortunately, Sunday Night Baseball, they're on ESPN to wrap things up, though I do think they're going to have Patrick Wisdom mic'd up.
That's so positive.
I love Patrick, but I don't know that he is as, silly.
He dances,
He does dance.
Yeah, so we get that.
But yeah, some of the guy, when they would mic up Anthony, it's he's goofy. So it was always really funny.
I've been trying. I just brought up all those minor leaguers. I'm trying to move on, and you bring up Anthony on the very last minute of the show. Come on. What are you doing?
Well, it's hard, Brendan, because I'm wearing my 2016 World Series championship sweater. So I just think of Anthony Rizzo because the Cubs won the World Series.
World Series, correct? Yeah. Yes. Okay, let's make sure.
Just keeping an eye on all that stuff, and we talked about the roster crunch with Jared Wyllys. And, that's the real thing, I think, for me to keep an eye on. Who's getting playing time? Are guys moving down? Do they make any tough decisions on some of those older veterans, things like that? And, a player to watch, I guess, for me, like, we got to see something from Nick Madrigal, right? Like, it was a bunch of grounder, weak contact tonight. Like, the last at bat, he does punch the ball to the right side, allows Heyward to go to third, technically does the job, right? It did look like that's what he went up there to do, but at some point, like, you got to see something, right?
I feel for him. I want him to succeed. It hurts me. Like, viscerally it hurts
me. As I talked about, I know with Luke and Cody and Ryan and a lot of those preseason episodes, like, a lot of the fan base just was not interested in him. They don't like the profile, probably coming over from the White Sox. A lot of guys, people just don't like him or just aren't really interested in him as a player. Yeah. So he's got to show something. Unfortunately, at least, from what we've seen in 2022, it's a lot of what people really feared from Madrigal. Though I will say he continues to look fine on defense. He made some solid plays in the field tonight. But again, he falls into that category of you figuring out what you have there. Like, I don't think there's any, guarantee. Like, I don't think anybody in the organization is thinking like, oh, no question, Nick Madrigal is the second baseman for the next 10 years, right? Like, he's got to go out and earn it. He's going to get that opportunity and ability to show things, but just like everybody else who's young and getting an opportunity, he's got to go out and do it. So he doesn't necessarily have to do it just in these 4 games with the Cardinals, but tomorrow's as good a day as any to start. So with that, we will leave you. Thank you to everybody in the YouTube chat. If you're listening on the podcast feed, hello, good morning. Happy to have you as well. But definitely shout out to the YouTube chat tonight. It was, as Luke Stuckmeyer would say, it was lit. He definitely knows what that word means. Tomorrow, Cardinal series, Luke, Cody, and I think Ryan should be back. They'll have pregame and postgame for you on Thursday. Brendan and I will be back with you for a podcast-only version after the Cubs and Cardinals finish up, hopefully early Sunday night, right? We'll wrap that up quick. We'll see. But yeah, as always, we appreciate your support for everything going on at CHGO. You guys know the deal. Live shows, post games, premium written content over at allchgo.com, where you can find our guest tonight, Jared Wyllys' work, and our guy, Ryan Herrera's work when he is back on the beat at Wrigley Field. Yep. As always, we appreciate you listening or watching, interacting, however you're doing that with everything going on at CHGO and the CHGO Cubs podcast. Pre-game, post-game tomorrow, Cody, Ryan, Luke, and Brendan and I will be back with you on Sunday. And as always, go Cubs.